right, this is season 1, episode 3 of The People We Meet. My name's Ty. I'm your host tonight, and I'm with my friend D, probably one of the most interesting people that I have ever met. He's been to 87 countries. He's seen the 7 natural wonders of the world, and I did some time aboard the Sea Shepherd, and I even spent some time in the Ukraine. Everybody comes from somewhere, and D has some absolutely fascinating stories, some of which I didn't even know about until tonight. I've known him since we were in high school together. Welcome to my show, D.
Thank you.
The beverage of choice tonight is a lemon ginger tea.
Indeed.
Excellent selection. This is probably the best damn cup of ginger tea I've ever had.
Got me through my last cold I picked up in Pakistan a couple weeks ago. So this is my new thing.
It's pretty good. So welcome, and we've got some ground to cover, so I'm going to launch right into it. You were one of my buddies in high school. You made a lasting impact on me. You've always been there. We've stayed in touch over the years. You got a pretty rich and interesting past. By the way, I traveled over here to Seattle for this, hauled all my crap with me. This is my first mobile interview. So here we are, just outside of Seattle. And this is where D was born.
Yep.
What
Harder view.
Or in the same pink house that is not there anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the early years. D's early years. You grew up in the U District.
Yeah, grew up around the campus a lot. My mom was attending University of Washington when I was young, so I went to local schools in that neighborhood. It was back actually when the U District was still more of a normal neighborhood. It wasn't all like apartment buildings basically. And so, I grew up there, spent a lot of time just going up on campus with my mom, and we did a lot of, like, my mom took me to a lot of places, like kind of cultured me, taking me to the ballet or tennis or, the zoo or whatever. And so just kept us pretty busy and camping. A lot of would go camping and going to the ocean. My grandparents were a big influence on me as far as like my initial love of nature and traveling to, different places. So.
Good background with mom.
Yep.
Sound like, and some good family involvement there. Yep. Lots of good childhood memories. Yep. What about that?
Yep. Lots. I always had a big animal lover. Always had cats and stuff. So we would, like I said, my grandparents were big influence as far as like every summer we'd go to like Mount Rainier or to the ocean, or they lived in Eastern Washington. So I'd go out there, which was the desert. So that was also like a new world for me. So it was like just cool going to all these different environments. Yeah. And loved just being with family and camping and then also being in the city and taking advantage of the stuff that you could do there with shows and music, concerts and all kinds of. My mom took me to do a lot of different stuff.
But your dad wasn't around?
Never, yeah. One day in my life when I was 4 months old, he was court ordered to show up to pay child support, and I guess he showed up and took a look at me, and then I never saw him again, and he never paid a dime.
So tell me a little about elementary school, because you're racially mixed.
Yeah.
What's your heritage?
Well, I'm mostly white. I'm German and a bunch of different European stuff, Scottish and Swedish, and but I do have Native American. My great grandma was Native, and so I'm like an eighth Mi'kmaq Indian from the East Coast, and then a little bit of French Canadian and some Cherokee. So I kind of grew up. I went to Indian Heritage School for a while, which was like kind of an additional schooling program. I went to an alternative school, University Heights. It's like probably like a museum almost now. I think it's one of those historical landmarks that they can never cut down. It's really cool. It was a beautiful school. I liked it. It was a different style of teaching, more kind of like where you sit on the rug and listen to the teacher rather than everyone in like structured desks. I appreciated it. I really enjoyed my school. We did a lot of cool field trips, I guess.
And you didn't have any perception of outward racism?
No. So I've got pretty big family with cousins. I've got I have a cousin with a dad from Mexico, a cousin with a dad from China, a cousin with an African-American dad, a cousin with a European dad, so like pretty much I've got the full range spectrum of color as far as family. And then in the U District in Seattle, it's also like that. It's a big immigrant community. It's a big university community. So a lot of, always around different people of different races, to the point where it was so mixed, it wasn't even really, races didn't even have that much of a separate identity, even to a certain extent, other than their own personal cultures or whatnot. But everyone just got along.
So as far as you were concerned, the field was pretty much level.
Yeah.
So where did you first run into that? Where was your first experience with it?
Like racism?
Yeah.
I mean, boy, I think maybe middle school, probably, and just noticing that people didn't mix, and so when I went to University Heights, it was a really mixed, like, I think they may have intentionally made it multiracial. It was an alternative school. It was like very, very mixed. And then when I went to middle school, it was a little different. It was actually in, a Black neighborhood. So most of the students were Black. And then there was, all the white guys were bussed in, which was the opposite of like when I was in high school, where it was a white neighborhood and then all the Black kids were bussed in. But it was just, you could tell there was definitely a difference. Like, people had their cliques and didn't really mix as much. And there was obvious cultural differences between everyone there. I don't know. I think I really took towards the Black community, since I never really had like a white identity, because I grew up in such a mixed area. They were just the people that I got along with and liked. I liked the music and I liked the dancing. And I liked the stuff they were doing and I liked their attitude. And like I said, I was kind of an animal lover and tree hugger, nature boy, hippie kid growing up, and kind of got picked on and, teased, and just didn't really know how to stand up for myself or how to deal with that very well my whole life. And when I started kind of hanging out in the hood, I kind of learned how to do that, so, and kind of the best defense is a good offense, sort of. So like, I never started shit with people, but when people started shit with me, I would just triple it at them, and they were like, "Whoa." And that was the first time I felt really empowered to kind of like stand up for myself and not be scared of people, and not, because anyone that's been bullied younger knows that's like the worst feeling in the world, right? You're just obsessed with it. You go home and you're just terrified. You just don't want to see that kid every day, and it's just awful. You're just like, oh, I hope if he doesn't show up to class, you're like, yay, and so it's just a horrible feeling being bullied. The opposite feeling of not being a bully, but standing up to the bully and taking no shit for them and throwing it back at them to the point where they're like, whoa, they have the stunned look on their face. I really liked that. And I just was like, yeah, no one's ever going to screw with me again, now that I know how easy it is to really just stand up for yourself. And growing up, people I did at that point in my life in the hood, they just kind of taught me, yeah, you like go all out. A fight is all in to win, and you don't hold back, and you just go ape shit. And usually that solves it. A lot of times you don't even have to fight. If you go hard enough on someone, they'll actually chicken out and just completely back off and never mess with you again.
When I finally met you, you were you were kind of known for that. You were kind of a legend. In fact, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But so that was kind of your scene, though. You were into the hip hop.
Yeah. So I got into the hip hop kind of slowly at first. I mean, it was right when it first started. So people were, it was kind of all together. There was the breaking and the bopping and the, DJing and spray painting. The whole thing was actually really popular. I was just into it probably 10 years before, like a lot of other white kids, So I was like one of the first ones. And actually, I would absolutely the first white rapper in Seattle. And any old school person that was there will tell you that.
And what was your name?
Daddy D in the place to be.
So that took you through high school, where I met you. And when I first met you, I didn't really know what to think. I was like, oh, this is a different cat, right? But the thing that was interesting to me was that you were super nice, and you were a natural leader in this class. We were in a conditioning class together. It was probably the most physically difficult.
Pretty hardcore. I don't think we could bust one of those out today. Maybe you could. Burnouts.
Yeah. You were a natural leader in that class. And that, to this day, that's probably one of the classes with the closest band of people. And you were very largely responsible for that. What the pups mind can achieve, what the body will achieve. You were one of my very close friends going, all that year, and we hung out a little bit. Seems like we smoked some resin out of a pipe in the bounce house.
Most likely. Where they tore it down.
Yeah. Our conditioning coach was Bob Cutler.
Yeah.
Now, you'd had a couple somewhat father figures through Big Brother
Big Brothers American program.
Okay, so you had these two dudes. One was a fighter pilot, USMC Marine Corps fighter pilot.
Yep.
And he was a Korean War guy, right?
Yep. No, he was Korean American.
Oh, he was Korean American.
Yeah. Okay. He was a young guy, actually. Yeah, pretty young.
So you got to spend some time with him. And then there was the other dude that you talked.
He was from Michigan. Really nice guy, kind of like a hippie, laid back guy. Really, really sweet guy though. Yeah.
The real deal showed up.
Yeah.
Bob Cutler. I remember you saying you're the dad I never had.
He was the first one to have a loving discipline, I guess you would say, right? Like good discipline, strong booming voice, barking out the orders. But he loved us, and he also accepted us too. And I was a bit crazy, and he stood up for me a few times, and he seemed to appreciate me and like my personality, even though I was pretty crazy at that time. because I think he just respected my work ethic in the conditioning class and the leadership and all that was, I guess, displaying. So yeah, we got along really good.
Yeah.
And it was cool for me to have someone like him like treat me like he thought I was, a good kid or cool, because everyone else thought I was a punk.
Well, especially because, I mean, you were the kid that you didn't do a very good job of staying out of trouble, did you?
I was in trouble. Yeah.
What separated him from an awful lot of people was he believed in you. And if I'm reading it right, that was a pretty life-changing experience for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just also at that point, getting buff, was awesome, right? I had him for 3 years, I believe. So, and so it was like, probably 16, 17, 18. And yeah, just kind of was my first, exposure to that. Waking up, and we'd always do the first period, because we just get out of the way, wake up early and do our run and do our burnouts, get the hard work done out of the early.
So then I graduated the year before you. You were supposed to graduate with.
Indeed. Yeah, I blew it. I was paying dues for my really bad freshman and sophomore year, where I was just suspended and expelled and failing classes, and I didn't care until I wanted to join the Marine Corps. And then they're like, "Oh, you want to join the Marine Corps? You have to have a high school diploma." And I was like, "Crap!" So got to get my act together now.
I took off. I didn't see you for a little bit while I was off doing boot camp and training schools and shit. And then I saw you again after we got back from Desert Storm.
Yeah.
You got a little story about that.
So I had actually got into a fight at a Halloween party right before deploying. Was defending a friend. Basically, I was at a party. It was a Halloween party. I was upstairs having a good time. And somebody came up, "Oh, your friend's getting his ass kicked downstairs, and what, blah, blah, blah." And so went downstairs, saw basically 3 guys like beating my friend up, kicking him. He was down on the ground. They were 3-on-1 in him. So I went and grabbed a bumper because it was an auto repair place. I don't know how we ended up having a party there, but that's where the party was. So anyways, that was the closest thing I saw, was a big detached bumper from a car. And I picked it up and just ran in there swinging for the fences, trying to get these guys off my friend. And it worked. However, I did end up giving one of the guys a brain injury. So that was a problem. Yeah. So pretty much they charged me as a misdemeanor. I had like a drill with the Marines that weekend. So I pretty much, I was like, I don't want to plead. I could have pled guilty to a misdemeanor. It's one of the biggest mistakes I ever made in my life, actually. I could have pled guilty to a misdemeanor assault, and they basically would have given me like 2 days in jail or something, a fine. But I was like, no, I was defending a friend, and plus I don't want to do 2 days because I have to be at the Marines like tomorrow. So if the way it works is if you plead guilty, you do your time right then. If you plead not guilty, then they basically let you out, and then you come back to court. So I was like, I need to get out because I need to go to be at the Marines. Like, I think this was like, I don't know, it was a Friday. It was a Friday or a Saturday. I needed to be check in with the Marines like Monday morning or something. And like, I forget. So I pled not guilty. I was going to come and plead my case later. Turned out the guy had a head injury and, a pretty bad brain injury. And so when I actually went back to state my case and whatever, they said, oh, they dropped the charge as a misdemeanor. And that's all they told me at the time. So I was like, okay. Then my unit got activated to go to Desert Storm. And then they basically told me, like, I don't even remember when, it was like the day before, they said, oh, yeah, we have a felony warrant for your arrest. And I'm like, I'm deploying with the Marines tomorrow to go to Desert Storm. And they're like, well, you have to turn yourself in. I'm like, yeah, so I called the Marines, said, what should I do? And they're like, no, we need you. We can't deal with this right now. We need you in war. They can deal with the court stuff and that when we get back. You're on our ticket now. Basically, the Marines were giving me up. And so, yeah, we went to actually SeaTac Airport. It was pretty crazy because they were doing like the news was there and they did a whole roll call and everything. And I told my commanding officers, I said, yeah, these guys said they have a warrant and they're going to arrest me at the airport. And they're like, oh, no, they're not. And so they pre-boarded me on the military plane. And so it was such a weird feeling getting on the plane while my entire unit was standing in formation at SeaTac with the news all around, and I'm sitting on the plane all by myself. It was a pretty weird feeling. And apparently what happened was they did the roll call for everyone, and they didn't call my name. And then the sheriffs came and were like, hey, where's this guy at? And they're like, oh, he's already on the plane. They're like, well, we have a warrant for his arrest. And they said, yeah, your warrant's not good on our plane. And he said, no, this is a King County warrant. We have jurisdiction here. And they said, basically the Marines told him, not on our plane, you don't, and refused to turn me over, which was awesome. Made me love the Marines even more. And they basically told him to kick gravel and travel.
They spirited you off.
Yeah, indeed. So, yeah. And then, of course, by the time I came back, then they dropped the hammer on me, So
I was at the airport when you came home. I remember that.
I had not even remembered that, but
yeah, it was.
Thank you for your support.
Yeah, it was short-lived. Yeah. I mean, I still supported you, but you weren't around for a while.
Yeah,
you had to leave. Yeah. So then what happened?
Yeah, so I got back, and it was pretty rough. I had twins. I had twin sons born. Right when right before I deployed. And then had another son. So at this point, they were pretty much trying to give me like 5 to 7 years in prison, and I was protesting, and I was saying self-defense of others, and we were just pretty much what ended up happening was I struck an Alford plea, which is a plea that says I do not admit to committing this crime. However, I believe that you guys have enough evidence or witnesses where there's a danger that I might get found guilty, and I don't want to risk doing 5 to 7 years. Or more, originally they were 7 to 10, then they came back with 5 to 7, but that was still too much for me having 3 babies in diapers. I wanted to be a family man. So pretty much I had to take the Alford plea deal and got 15 months in prison, in state prison. And yeah, so
you go from being a combat engineer.
Yeah.
Tell me, and real quick, just back up real quick. Tell me what you did.
Yeah, that was it. I was a combat engineer, Red Patch Rhino. We're the guys with the red patches that we joke around because they're bright targets, right, for the enemy. And we're the first guys on the beach. We have to clear everything, use the C4, Bangalore torpedoes, all that good stuff, and blow up all the concertina wire. So we're either basically creating barriers or blowing them up, right? So that was what I did. And so originally, I was a combat engineer, went to Courthouse Bay, Camp Lejeune. Also went to Pendleton, did landing support training also. So I was originally a combat engineer and then got attached to a landing support battalion, and then when we went in country, we were attached to a motor transport battalion, and then bounced around, and you know how that goes. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things where you go to war and they're like, we're gonna have unit cohesion. We're not gonna split you up. You're gonna do exactly what you were trained to do, and then you get there and we're like, we need 4 Marines, we need 2 Marines. You guys are going here. This squad's going here, and they mix you all up and send you everywhere, and you're all doing stuff that you weren't trained to do, and that's just how a war is, I guess, right?
Well, sometimes you figure it out as you go along, don't you? So you go from that, and now you're going to prison.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was pretty stressed about it. I remember my lawyer saying, well, you've been in the Marines, you've been in the military, so you've done the whole kind of like that thing, And so I was like, okay. So I went in there thinking like, I'm just going to do my time. And I'd been to jail before, right? I'd been just dumb stuff for a couple of days, never longer than like a couple of days, just like whatever, street fighting or getting caught with a weapon in my car, just random dumb stuff, I was a bad teenager. I was running with gangs, I was doing stupid shit, so I was no stranger to jail. So I just wasn't really too concerned about it, right? Show up in prison. It's a totally different thing. Me growing up in the Central District, most of my friends from, because a lot of times your closest friends are your friends you actually meet in, middle school and high school. And when you're a teenager, those are your friends for life. So yeah, when I went to prison, I seen all my friends from the hood, and they're like, Daddy, and I'm like, hey, this guy, that guy. And they're like, what are you doing here? Haven't seen you in a while. Remember, we were in juvie together, and blah, blah, blah. So I was thinking, you're still locked up. So it was like, yeah, it was kind of cool at first. Like I seen a bunch of my friends that I grew up with, and they're like, I thought you joined the Marines. What are you doing here? I'm like, I did. And weren't you in the war? We saw you on, because they did actually a news special on my wife and holding my babies, like, when, like local families, local dad deployed with brand new twin baby boys. And so anyways, they had seen me on the news. They're like, yeah, last we saw you were on the news going to war and had babies. Now you're in prison. What happened? So, yeah, but it was cool to see my old friends. But then I was promptly informed by all the white pride guys, you can't hang out with the black guys. This is, penitentiary. This is closed custody. This was up in Clallam Bay, Shelton and Clallam Bay. And they're like, yeah, that's not allowed here. You got to stay with your kind. And my kind, I guess they were insinuating, was the neo-Nazis. So it's just not. I was like, I'm not hanging out with these guys. Like, so, yeah. So then I was kind of like, well, I don't want to hang out with the neo-Nazis. I guess I'm not allowed to hang out with the black guys that I know. So I'll just stay in my cell. And then they're like, no, you can't stay in your cell either.
It was kind of a thinly veiled threat, though. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's not how it's done here.
What was going to happen?
Yeah, that was just not accepted. Like, you couldn't even eat, you can't eat at the table, and I didn't even actually know what they were talking about. They were just, they made a racial comment. They call black people toads. I'll just say it. And I don't know why. And that's what they're like, oh, you can't eat with the toads. I'm like, what are you talking about? I had no idea what they're talking about. And then, the black guys, you're a white guy, you can't eat, your meals with the black guys. I'm like, well, who can I eat with? Well, the white guys. I'm like, but I don't know. I don't know any of these guys, and you guys are weirdos. You're covered with swastika and SS tattoos and, pure wood. I'm like, you're not really, we don't have anything in common. I don't know your country songs or your rock and roll songs. I'm a rapper. Anyways. So, yeah.
They called you the white pimp, right?
I mean, yeah, I had all kinds of crazy stuff, yeah, all that. And so, anyways, but, so I just, and then they're like, it's just hated prison. These guys are just so immature. They're doing life, most of these guys, they're never getting out, so they don't care. They're just go crazy. I remember we'd play board games like Risk, and they get mad. You invade their country, and they smash the dice and nuke the board. We call it nuking the board, where they just basically flip the whole board, kick them over, and get mad, smash the dice on the ground. I remember all the dice in prison had all the corners broken off, always from some angry guy smashing them on the ground, right? That's just how it was. Like, these guys can't control themselves. Like, I see why you guys are in maximum security penitentiary for a reason. And I just hated it, and just not, and then like, they're like, oh, what's your beef? What are you doing here? I'm like, oh, I have an assault. That's like a legitimate, like, they always tell you, oh, that's like a honorable, manly case, right? But then they're like, well, we need to see your paperwork. I'm like, why? Oh, because we could be assault on a child or something. And I was like, what? Oh, okay. So I remember I had to like call my lawyer, say, get me my paperwork so I can prove that I hurt a grown man in a fight
with a car bumper.
With a car bumper. Yeah.
I never understood how.
Yeah, it was so it was like one of those like kind of detached bumpers that's like maybe you would see on like a Volvo or something, right? And they're like part metal and part plastic, right?
Okay.
And so and I just picked the thing up like a big old log or something, just swung it basically like kind of like level. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, that's how I got my nickname in the Marines, Bumper.
All right. So prison's pretty much sucking right now. You have to prove the merit of your crime.
Yeah.
And
brand new babies can only see them like once a month because they ship me way up in Clallam Bay, which is in the middle of nowhere. So it was like a real, trek for any family to come and visit me. So I didn't see much family and whatever. And so, yeah, I hated it.
But at the same, it
was good for me.
It was found a silver lining.
It was good for me because when you're in prison, you have to what they call program, which means you got to like work for pennies, like $1.50 a day, working in the laundry or the kitchen or whatever. It's going nowhere, right? Or you can program by going to school. So I started they had like local community college classes that you could take there pretty much, and to like, that would be, some of them were transferable to community college. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to start doing this. And plus I'd already been told my whole life that I was an idiot and way too smart for doing dumb stuff like being in gangs or even joining the Marines. They're like, oh, are you joining the Marines? Like, you're smart. You should like be a lawyer. Actually, you argue good. You should be a lawyer. People used to always tell me that it's like impossible to win an argument with you. You should go to law school. Yeah. So anyways, I knew I needed to do something different. And I was kind of done with the hood is rough too, so that takes its toll on you too. Like, so even coming out of prison, I was in the hood, got in trouble, went to prison, but even the hood is rough too, because it's just always drama. Someone's always jealous of you, wants to gank you, wants to take your shit, wants to fight you. So I was just kind of burned out on everything. I loved the Marines, but I had to leave because of my felony conviction. So I couldn't get back in the Marines, or I'd probably still be in the Marines. You know what I mean? I couldn't go back to like the hood because I have a family now, and I would have just got pulled back in the same gang shit that I was already doing. And not to mention a lot of my friends at that point, a lot of my friends got killed. A lot of them, went to prison. So it was just like, yeah, that was kind of like where you're going to end up, The
writing was kind of...
Yeah, you're going to end up dead or in prison. I just got out of prison. I don't really want to die because I just had a bunch of babies. So, yeah, I straightened my act up and went to college.
Because it's funny to me because, like, I never knew... You were in trouble a lot. I didn't know it. I mean, you were just like my good friend. And you never struck me as anybody that actually went out looking to get in trouble. But somehow you just always managed to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember even like right before I went to boot camp, I remember like I was with a couple of my friends. It was a couple black guys, and we were at Dick's Drive-In. And before we got there, apparently there had been a fight with a couple black guys. It had nothing to do with me or my friends. This was another like one of my experience with racism, right? So like we just show up, me and two of my buddies. We're showing up to buy some Dick's Deluxes. Next thing you know, Seattle police come flying in the parking lot. Right, they run up, grab my friends, like slam them on the ground. The rest, I'm like, what the hell's going on? Do we have warrants or something? Like, what's going on? And they basically were getting accused for a fight that had happened before we even got there, right? Because we got there and you could tell it was like kind of the chaos, like oh, something's going on, like it's kind of crazy, but maybe
you guys still got hamburgers.
They did, yeah, they did my homies wrong. I remember my one friend Marvin, and they just really roughed him up. I remember they took his coat and put it over his head and like smashed his face on like the counter, like the little stainless steel counter, and took him down. He was like resisting, like, I didn't do shit, get off me. And they're like, shut up, you're going down. So I was pissed. I was going to try to get in their face, like, hey, what are you doing? They're like, stand back, none of your business. I'm like, dude, we just got here. What are you arresting him for? And then there was even someone else like that was like, it's not them. And the cops are just ignoring them. You're like, that, literally someone was telling the police that these aren't the guys. And the police just ignored him and arrested my friend. So I was getting mad. And I told the guy, and this was actually already in the Marines. I was already in the Marines. And I remember the police showed up. And so basically, I'm arguing with the police. I'm like, dude, you guys are tripping. Like, this guy he didn't do it. He just showed up with me. He had nothing. They were like, basically, shut up, back off, and then I kept arguing with them, right? Because they basically told me to go the fuck away. And I was like, no, I'm not going to leave and just let you arrest my friend for something he didn't do, man. I'm telling you, we just got here. He didn't fight anybody. I don't know what you needed, but basically the cop got pissed off at me. And so he grabbed me. He's like, that's it. Now you're going to jail too, right? And I'm like, okay, right. So interfering, whatever they were going to charge me with, obstruction of justice. I think that's what it was originally going to be, right? So the cop, he takes me up to the fence. I remember it was like a wooden fence, and he pushes me up against the fence, and he freaking takes my left hand behind, takes my right hand, handcuffs me. So he had my left hand behind my back. He put the handcuff on my left hand, and then I had my right hand up on the fence, right? And then he took my head and he smashed my head into the fence, just like a cheap blow, right? Just like bash, messed my forehead up, cut it, everything. And then I freaking flipped around and punched him. I was a young Marine and this guy did me dirty, and I was a little bit trained now, right? So he smashed my head into the fence, and then he did it once, and then he was going to do it again. I remember I felt him, he bashed me, and then I felt him take my head, and he was about to do it again. And I did my little move, like spun around and just bopped him, right? And he was, caught him off guard, right? And then freaking took him down, right? And then two other cops seeing what happened. Oh, shit. So they run. They grab me off him, right? And put me down and then got me under control, handcuffed me. And then that dude, he was pissed now, right? Because I outmaneuvered him and punched him. He was furious. So he got on, he almost George Floyded me, dude, straight up. He put the knee in my neck and I couldn't breathe, dude. And I was like about to pass out. I was like, I was handcuffed, knee in the neck. I thought the guy was about to kill me, actually. He was furious, right? Almost passed out. I think they stopped him. They realized like I was like screwed, right? So then I remember they picked me up. They put me in the back of the police car. The guy comes up, looks through the window, and he's like, yeah, he's talking shit to me. And I was just like, whatever, dude, and then, but then there was a sergeant showed up. I was like, what's going on? And the sergeant was cool. I told the sergeant, I said, look, I'm a Marine, blah, blah, blah. And the sergeant respected that. He was like, you're a U.S. Marine. I was like, yes, man, I got my military ID, everything. This is what happened. I showed up with my friend, these guys, blah, blah. So I basically told him the story. And I said, can you please take a photo of my head? Because that's the only reason I hit the guy was because he was smashing my head on the fence, man. And so the sergeant actually took a picture of my forehead, the big gash on my forehead. And then later, when I went to court for assault on a police officer, right, which is a serious charge, right, and he was lying. His version was some bullshit. We asked him to place his hands. It was some bullshit. He just lied. He basically made it like I was a maniac who attacked him for nothing. Didn't mention the part about him smashing my head into the fence for no reason, right? With one arm behind my back. Anyways, we actually, they got the lawyer up there. My lawyer, I hired a lawyer and we were good. And he was good. And he basically got the cop up there to say, he's like, so what about the fence? You smashed his head against the fence. He's like, no, nowhere near. I didn't even arrest him anywhere near the fence. I arrested him over in the corner of the parking lot, like 50 feet away from the fence. We weren't even near the fence. He's lying. But I had witness statements from people stating that they had seen him do that he bashed my head on the fence for sure. And then I had the picture that the sergeant had taken. And so the judge actually got really pissed off at the cop and this was like, how dare you, you're an officer of the law and you coming in here lying in my courtroom, blah, 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 case dismissed, threw it out and everything. So that was pretty cool. And that was one of my tangent stories that I don't know how we got there. But yeah, I remember he's like, well, you really stepped on your own dick this time, huh, pal? That's such a cop thing to say. I'm like, dude, I didn't do shit. Like, I'm just trying to stand up for my friend, like
it's like I feel like a little kid watching a show. I'm like, how's Daddy D gonna get out of this?
I know, right?
All right, so let's get back. So you had to have had like a serious talking to with yourself.
Yeah. So I think it was like, when you're in you're already in close custody, and then I got sent to the hole. Like, so you just get into fights with people there. It's just unavoidable. People are dickheads, and they mess with you. And if you have any kind of self-respect, and sense of honor, you're not going to put up with that crap. And I remember, like, just like stupid shit. One time, like, some guy blocked me from getting into my cell. Like, they open all the cell doors and everybody has to run and get in, and then everyone's in, and then they'll close the door. And some random dickhead, I don't even know who he was, put his arm out, held on, and blocked me. And I was like, dude, what are you doing? He wouldn't let me through, big dude. And then the door started closing. He jumped in his cell, and I ran and wasn't able to get into my cell in time. I was like, oh, hey, flag him. I didn't get in time, so they let me in. Next thing I know, the goon squad comes with the face mask and the shields. Oh, refusal to lock down. You're going to the hole. I was like, what? They dragged me to the hole and threw me in the hole for a week. And I was like, dude, and like charged me. They were going to like charge me with an extra, like take away my good time and potential extra charge of refusing to lock down. All for some BS, man. I was like, what? No. So I just hated it. And then you're sitting in the hole, man. And it's like a dungeon, dude. You're sitting they never turn off the light. They leave this bright blue light on. It's not that bright, but it's annoying. It's a blue light in your room all night. And they come by every 15 minutes and bang on the window, and you have to do body movement to show them you're alive. So they basically fuck with you and keep you up all night. And it's like bullshit. They screw with you. And then not to mention you're in the hole, right? So they call it the IMU, the Intensive Management Unit, right? That's what they call it when I was there. And that's where the crazies are. So you got the guys singing songs, the absolute nuttiest, and the craziest people in there. So you're not getting sleep even if the lights were out, but it's just a horrible thing. Like 1 hour a day. You're in the room 23 hours a day. Little crap, they give you like a 2-inch pencil to write with, so you don't like stab yourself. You can't have any stuff that you could make like like the sheets are all weird, so you can't like hang yourself. Like it's all kinds of weird shit like that. You have like they give you the food in a slot. You have to step back. They open your slot, put the food in, and then close it. And then you have to step forward and get. It was just so. I hated it. I was like, oh my god. So I can never. And then that mixed with all the racism and just the people trying to fit, and it's hard in prison because you want to stand up for yourself. And I'd learned to do that, but there's some times where you necessarily like don't know if it's worth it. Like I remember one of the baddest dudes in the prison this guy was just crazy, super buff, super crazy, lifer, right? He shot a cop, killed a couple other people. He's just nuts. I remember one time I was playing volleyball, and he was like, he just came and like took my spot and was like, beat it. And my instant reaction was like, hey, fuck you. And then I was like, you know what? It's not worth it, man. I'm just going to beat it. I guess I want my good time, and I don't want to get killed. I don't want to, get an extra charge, and I don't want to start no shit with this guy. And I was like, because he treated everybody like that, right? So I was just like, whatever. So I just bailed. But that was really hard for me to swallow my pride in that moment. Like, that's the only time where I came close to maybe getting punked, but I hated it.
So was it the first time that it sounds to me anyway, that was like one of the first times that you made a conscious choice?
Yeah. It's probably the only time that one. That's the only one I really remember.
That it wasn't worth it.
Yeah, it wasn't worth it. And, I was just like, yeah, this is, I just like it. Yeah, I want to go. I want to get the hell out of this hellhole and go see my babies. Can you see my kids? And yeah.
So you got your degree. So just kind of my own little side note. You're sitting here telling me this stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, you're saying it like it's a funny story.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here laughing my ass off, and I'm like, this is some fucked up shit. Yeah, this is this is hard time.
Yeah.
And
custody. Here's the other thing that sucks. I'll throw this out there real quick. Sorry. So like they go on a point system on whether you're like, if it's like minimum custody, you can do like work release maybe, or they have these work camps, right? Oh, you can go and like chop wood or whatever, and which I would actually love to do that, right? Be out in the nature. And then they have like medium custody, which is like, Monroe and Shelton, where it's just the transition to the R units and stuff like that. And then they have closed custody, which is basically Clallam Bay or Walla Walla. You start off with a certain amount of points, and then they reduce your points every time. And then once you get below, at that time, it was like if you have below 36 points, you're closed custody, maximum security. That stupid incident in the R units, because in the R units, that was in Shelton. So when you first go to jail, you get sentenced, and then they send you the R units, and you're there for like a month or two, for a month and a half, something like to process you, right? And then they decide where they're going to send you. I lost like 5 points for that stupid refusal to lock up. That dropped me from like 41 points to 36 points. I already had a violent crime, had a deadly weapon crime, had some other priors, and so I had all my points were already to the point where I could have got medium custody, but that dropped me to maximum security. And so like now you have to go basically Clallam Bay or Walla Walla. So and I chose Clallam Bay because at the time my family lived in Bellingham and Walla Walla was like Eastern Washington, so they did let me choose that. So that was nice. But
how far along did you get through the educational process while you were in prison?
Oh boy, I don't remember. I think they had like these just kind of like little 3-month introduction like to accounting classes and stuff like that, an introduction to business. And so I think I got like some little certificates. I think they had it was like the Clallam Bay Community College. They had a local community college, and they would basically like send one of their teachers to go to the prison and teach classes. 3 days a week or something like that. You know what I mean? So so I don't remember. Like I just remember I got interested in accounting, and I remember talking to the little professor there, and I said, hey, man, like, what can I do that's going to, have good job security and make a lot of money? He's like, well, accounting, that's a good one. He said, accounting, like, people always need accounting. It's business. You learn a lot of different stuff. It pays well. There's always jobs available. And so I was like, okay, so that's kind of where I first got into that. And I was like, okay, that's what I want to be an accountant. So I did they had like bookkeeping classes and then just clerical classes, just kind of the basic introductory level classes. And still, I don't remember how many I did or if all of the credits transferred or whatever, but I basically got enough done and applied for community college so that when I got out of prison, I went to Whatcom Community College because my wife she was from Bellingham. So even though we were in Seattle, living in Seattle together at the time when all that happened, so she basically, when I went to prison, she went back up to Bellingham so she could get help with her family for the babies, right? Because we had 3 babies. And so then when I got released from prison, that's where you have to release. They call it community placement at the time. You basically have to go to a place that's approved. You have to stay there for 1 year. You can't get in any trouble. They have people randomly coming and checking on you all the time to make sure that you're where you're supposed to be, whether it's home or in school, and you're not allowed to leave the city without permission. I remember actually I had 2 different friends of mine, good friends of mine, murdered during the time I was up there, and I had to get like special permission from my, my PO to, or what they call a community placement officer or something like that to get to leave to go to Seattle. And I remember the second time they're like, you had another, they didn't believe me. They're like, you had another friend killed? Like, they thought I just wanted to go to Seattle and party or something. I'm like, no, I really did. And I had to like provide them with like the obituary, to prove I actually had these friends getting killed who had not got out of the gang life. You know what I mean? So,
So a lot of this is, out of necessity.
Yeah.
I mean, you made a conscious decision that you're going to change your life.
Yeah.
Up until this point, education hadn't been real high on your priority
really low
list.
Yeah.
You had a 5-year program, getting out of high school.
Yeah.
How did you feel about learning at this point? You don't just go to class and walk out with an accounting degree. How did your?
I slayed it. I was Dave the Slave, man. I like went all in on it, right? I was a straight A student. I graduated, University of Washington School of Business, cum laude. Like I was a 4.0 student. I was in Whatcom Community College. 4-point honors, beta kappa psi, alpha beta psi, all the honors programs, tassel. I had the ribbon. I had every pretty much award you could get for like excellence. I won a ton of like scholarships and stuff just because for my grades and for my life story and my writing ability. So and then went to North Seattle Community College, straight A's there, like everything. I always got 4 points, and they call them A's there, but it was like a 4.0. My cumulative GPA was 3.9 going into the UW.
Were you surprised? I mean,
no, because I knew. I know I'm smart. People told me I'm smart, and I knew I could apply myself. I just never had the interest and never wanted to apply myself. I just didn't. I don't know what I was thinking. I was just grown up, and I was a rapper. I was a nature boy, and then I was a rapper, and then I was a Marine, so I just, school wasn't, I don't know. And I didn't have a lot of people in my family that did that so it was, but I went all in. I was like, I want to be the best. I want to make the most money. I want to work the hardest. So I just went.
So when you pulled it all out, and accomplished what you accomplished, you were like, you kind of knew it was in there all along. You just hadn't really tapped it before.
Yeah.
So you ended up with business administration.
Yep.
was your bachelor's, and then an accounting master's.
Yeah.
Then what happened?
Yeah, so then I've just had a nice career. Honestly, I've done a lot of work as an auditor, as a financial accountant, as a consultant, as a finance director. I do stuff like that. Yeah, so it's been great. Actually, it's allowed me. It actually I really loved the change. I kind of felt like I was on the other side now, because up until then I'd worked in like Jack in the Box and Italian restaurants, and and I remember my worst job ever was like the Shell gas station, and it was and I went and they were like, it was like December and it was like 15 degrees and they had me scrubbing oil off the ground, for $5 an hour. I did that for like 2 days. I was like, yeah, dude, I'm good. And he's like, oh, I thought your Marines are tough. And I'm like, yeah, this is a shit job, dude. So up until that point, all my jobs had been shitty, dishwasher at Azteca Mexican restaurant, So I went from kind of like despising the upper class or the bourgeoisie as I saw them or whatever. But, then I realized once you get into what they call and they're like, now you're a professional, right? That was the word that they would always throw around when you're like, get your basically your business administration degree. You're a professional now. And then I realized it's different. Now you've got like benefits and nobody cares if you're, 5 minutes late, or whatever, as long as you get your work done and you're honest and work well with others and you're proficient, that's what they care about. And so, it was actually a nice, it was a very nice change. And you get plenty of like paid vacation and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a good sign, actually, dude. It's the furnace running. The furnace is running. That's going to be some background noise. Yeah. Yeah, no, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Even in the beginning of my career, though, it was still difficult. I remember I was like, doing like auditing with the big six, which back then was like Deloitte and Touche and Ernst and Young. And that was when Arthur Andersen was still around and, and Price Waterhouse and Coopers and Lybrand, all in, blah, blah, blah. So, and I remember even in the beginning of my career, I still was like a little bit myself too much. Mm-hmm. So they told me like, oh, tone it down. I remember some of my first jobs, it really kind of sucked, even in accounting, because I'm like, okay, fine. Like I've made it, right? I've got my degree. I'm working for top accounting firms. And then they would have their like your reviews and they were dinging me on the dumbest shit, man. They'd be like, so you wore a suit to inventory count. I'm like, yeah, what's wrong with that? They're like, oh, well, because when you do inventory, you get dirty. So you're supposed to dress down that day. Oh, sorry for not dressing down for inventory. And like, we went to Thai restaurant with a client. They're like, oh, you ordered your food spicy. You're just a staff accountant. You don't want to stick out. I was like, oh, okay. One time I was doing a tax return and I needed some extra information. I called the client to get it. And then the partner called me in their office and chewed me out. You never called the contacted client. You talked to us and we contacted him. I was like, oh, sorry. Like they were just mad about like the dumbest stuff. And then I remember the craziest part was I graduated with all my all my honors and everything. And then like I remember my first job, I won't say the firm, but they didn't give me an offer at the end. And I was like, why? And oh, here's another one I'll throw out there. I remember we went to a partners like they have these, they recruit you, right? They come and they actually recruit Beta Alpha Psi, the UW is Accounting Honor Society, blah, blah, blah. And then in the big firms, they come and they take you on like yacht cruises and they take you to the partner's house on Mercer Island and stuff like that, right? They're all, because they want to get the guys with the best grades, and whatever. So I remember like going there, I went to a party at the managing director, managing partner's house, and they're like, he had a big pool, and he's like, hey guys, come on, we got a big pool, like somebody go use the pool, like come on, and let's have some fun. So I'm like, hey, I'll do that, of course, me, I'm like, I'll do it, I'll be the guy. So I went and jumped in the pool and splashed around, like, and nobody joined me. I was like, I won't. Finally, I got out. And then later, they brought that up in my review. Like, yeah, you never want to stick out too much. Like when you went swimming, I'm like, I thought that was cool. Like he was like, come on, guys, like someone's got to be first. Let's do the pool. I was like, I'll be that guy. I thought I was going to get bonus points for that. And instead, they like knocked me for it. And I was like, this sucks. I didn't know how to relate to these guys either. I felt like when I first went in the Marines and my first experience with like crazy rednecks, and I love rednecks. I love a lot of rednecks, but some of them are real dickheads and they're hard to get along with. And so that was like or when I first went to the hood, right? When I went from being a happy nature boy, went in the hood and people are fighting. You got to like, stand, be ready on your toes. And so, I felt like here I am in the situation again where I don't fit in, with all these accountants. And I remember they freaking ended up giving the job to my buddy who had terrible grades, and he was not a good accountant. He was always coming to me for help, right? Like, okay, hey, can you help me with this? And hey, can you figure that out? He's like, oh, how do you do that? And so they gave him the offer and not me. And I remember he was shocked. He was like, dude, how'd they give me the offer and not you? Like, you're 10 times smarter than I am. You work harder. You come in early. You beat your budget on all the assignments, like, because you have a audit budget or a tax return. You have a, like, oh, you got to do it in 40 minutes or, billable time. Oh, and I was like the best, and I had the best scores, but it was just, I think they couldn't relate to me because I'm crazy. I'm just I'm too hyper. My background is too not similar to them. So, and I remember talking to a one recruiter, and he was just saying, yeah, like, don't show too much personality and don't stand out, and never try to take the limelight, and kind of like, don't be yourself too much. You got to suppress your character, and never work with government because that's a career killer. It's a resume killer because everyone knows government workers suck. And I remember thinking, this was all terrible advice, right? But it made sense at the time because I was like, how do I fit in this world, right? And it's like a small world that people know each other and they refer you and you get clients and you got to, and so as I got better in my career, I actually started developing expertise that people needed. I developed certain niches, and I remember there were some government niches I had done. Nobody does the government accounting classes or the nonprofit accounting classes because they hate the stuff. It's really complicated. It's totally different than normal accounting if you want to go work for the government. And no one in this competitive program at the UW, right? You got to get into the UW. You got to get into the business school, then get into the accounting concentration. Then, they only have certain, like, we have 30 slots and you have to, like, basically apply to, like, get the best, to get this even degree. So I finally, got to the point where my expertise was actually really helping people. They're like, oh, we need people who know this GASB pronouncement, or, that's a Government Accounting Standards Board, or the Government Finance Officers Association. Oh, GFOA needs an expert in this. And nobody knew that crap because nobody did the government classes. And I took them all because I was like, I want to know everything. I want to do tax. I want to do auditing. I want to do, economics. I want to do, finance. I want to do everything, right? Financial accounting, private accounting, nonprofit, so I really wanted to know it all. I wanted to be really, really good. And it paid off for me in the long run. I ended up developing niches and getting a lot of good billable hours with local governments all over the state. And I remember thinking that guy gave me terrible advice, like, oh, no, Then people actually started liking me because I was relatable. And whether it was like, oh, you're from the hood. Okay, I'm from the hood too. Or, oh, you speak Spanish. I speak Spanish too. Or, oh, you're in the military. A lot of these guys are military. Or, and, oh, you're a nature. Oh, you're a traveler. Oh, so as I kind of developed my life story, my career began to grow to now, all my clients love me. I'm turning down work all the time, and they always want to catch up with me and like, hey man, like, we got work for you. But even if not, I'd love to go out to lunch sometime. So it's,
you made yourself valuable.
Yeah.
By wanting to be the best.
Yeah.
And doing the things that other people didn't want to do. And in the process, you never compromised who you are.
Right.
Some other things happened after that. You ended up with the travel bug because you don't go touring through 87 countries because you sat in accounting school.
Yeah, so obviously being deployed in a war, you're kind of in a standoff position. You have a weapon. You're telling everyone to not get close to you because you're afraid they may grab your rifle or, and that's like, as a Marine, that's like your worst nightmare. I remember it happened to one guy. And he got in trouble. Why'd you let the guy get close enough to grab your rifle? And he's like, oh, you should have, put the butt in his forehead. How dare you lose your rifle? And Marine,
basically how you made the decision that you were going to start traveling.
Not traveling. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
It's all right, man. I'm there for you.
Okay. Yeah. Appreciate you. So being deployed as a soldier, I had always enjoyed what little traveling I'd done, whether it just been to at that point, it had only really been like national parks, but going to new countries and just seeing the culture and the food and the music and the locals, I just loved it. I wanted to do it, but not in a capacity as a soldier, as basically a dickhead Marine representing my government, because I was a dickhead, I'm honestly, we're young Marines, we're 19, 20, I wasn't politically correct back then,
manners hadn't been particularly defined.
Yeah, and in a war zone, man, how it is, man. It's just crazy there, and so there's a little bit of groupthink and and you're influenced by your higher ups, and so I just didn't like having to be in that position of having to just be I wasn't an invading soldier or a conquering soldier. It wasn't anything like that, but it was just, you just kind of had to be a dickhead, and I don't know, my job, we'd have guys that would be driving convoys in the middle of the night, they would just stop the dick truck and get out. And you're like, what are you doing? What are you doing, man? Like, get back in and like drive. Oh, you're just get in now. You're always having to like threaten someone, do this now or die. You're always like, getting mad at someone, crazy stuff all the time, and stressful situation. And I wanted to travel, but not, have it.
I wanted to go and pee.
Yeah, I wanted to go pee. And like I said, I love rednecks, but sometimes they're dickheads, and like they were like mess with me because I would like to hang out with the locals, like, because I was curious and I would go and talk to the locals, like the truck drivers or, the guys, helping us out, with random like military, side jobs that were basically contracted out by the Marines. And so I'd like go hang out with them guys and they'd be like, oh, would you like to have some tea with us? Or I'm like, oh, I'd go over, what are you guys cooking? And it's chicken. Like, oh, man, you want some? Yeah, I'd eat chicken and rice with the locals and have some tea. And then the other Marines are like messing with me, like, oh, why are you hanging out with the Hotchies, man? Why are you, and just, or they would go and on the weekends, I remember they would go and they would go and get drunk and go party and go to bars. And I would like go and see like cultural sites, or like go to like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going to go see, there's this really cool, I'm going to hike up this mountain. It has a view of the valley and I'm going to go to this cool waterfall. And they're like, what?
Somebody to go with you or you just?
No, I would always by myself, man. None of these guys would go with me. They're all dickheads. I would be like, come on, guys, everywhere, all the time, man. I was always the guy that wanted to do some nature stuff or some cultural stuff. I'm going to go to the museum or I'm going to go to this historical landmark or I'm going to go do this. And then none of them, they always just want to go party. And that was just not my thing.
Tell me a little bit about the Sea Shepherd.
So I've always been a animal lover, It even stems to just my personality. I remember when I went to prison for bonking the guy with the bumper. But the reason I did it was because him and his friends were beating up my friend. And I remember my grandma wrote a letter to the governor. She was trying to get me out. She was trying to get me pardoned, right? My grandma, I loved her. She was also my inspiration for traveling too. And she was wonderful. And she was from Texas, but, lived there her whole life, but came up here and worked on the Hanford Project, and had like a top secret clearance and all this crazy stuff she couldn't tell us for like 50 years. And then she told us all this cool stuff after 50 years that we didn't know. And it was funny because my grandfather also worked at Hanford. That's where they met, right? And he had like a pretty high clearance. And it turned out she actually had a much higher clearance than him the whole time, but she couldn't even tell him she had the higher clearance until like 50 years. So it's like cool. So, anyways, so my grandma wrote a letter to the governor just saying, David's a great guy. He's a wonderful. And he said, basically, he has an extreme sense of justice and will always stand up for the vulnerable, and that shouldn't be punished, and it was just I remember I read that, they put a copy of the letter in like, my file or something. I remember reading it and feeling so like, it made me feel really good that my grandma just believed in me and felt so strong. She probably wrote the president, she was just trying to get me out because she was so proud of me. And then to see me go to prison for this, she was really upset about it and wouldn't stand for it. And so, yeah, I think that sense of justice has, whether it's been protecting someone getting, attacked, or with animals, even with animals, so the animal abuse and cruelty, and then seeing like, dolphins being slaughtered in Japan and like whales being hunted. I was, it's the same reason I went to Ukraine, to help out later, so it's just, I guess my grandma nailed it in that letter. I have an extreme sense of justice. I just can't sit around and watch oppression, even if it's just, animals or people or whatever. I feel like there's a saying among like a lot of us that do this type of stuff. If not me, who?
How long were you aboard?
Well, I mean, we did a bunch of different campaigns. So it was probably like my first campaign. I wasn't even with Sea Shepherd. I was actually with Save Japan Dolphins, which is, I watched the movie The Cove. It was won the Academy Award, the Oscar for Best Documentary in 2009. I watched that, and it was just basically talking about the slaughter of dolphins, and it was just horrible. They're killing them, they're rounding them up, and just spearing them to death, just so they can. Basically, what they do is they're looking for like a couple dolphins to, basically they only want female bottlenose dolphins, right? Because they're pretty and they're trainable. The males, I guess, don't train well. And they want to sell like 2 of them to an aquarium somewhere in the world. And then they just kill the rest of them and make like dog food out of them. And I was like, yeah, they're just in this movie. It was just really like, it's a heart sinking movie watching this. You can't, you're gonna cry if you watch this. If you're any kind of a compassionate, sentient human being, you're probably going to be pretty choked up, watching this movie. And I was just like, I got to do something. And there was like, in the end of the movie, it's like, but, it ended on a cheery note, but you can do something, write your congressman, do whatever, come volunteer. And I was like, I'm doing it. And so, yeah, I ended up, they had a big meeting It was actually in Hollywood, right? They had a bunch of high donor meeting and this big thing. And I remember I signed up for it and went down there and met all these like cool Hollywood stars that support Sea Shepherd and met all the crew and everyone. And I remember I was like, yeah, I'm actually going to Taiji, Japan, where the dolphin slaughter is, like in like a week or something. They're like, really? Yeah, we're starting a group there called the Cove Guardians. So I went there officially with Rick O'Barry is the guy who made the movie The Cove, right? It was directed by Louis Sahoyos, but he was the guy. He's the guy in the movie. He's the guy going undercover. He's the guy. He's actually now banned from Japan. They finally kicked him out for good. And he's an old guy, right? But he trained the first dolphins ever at the Miami Seaquarium. And then actually after he found out how beautiful and amazing these creatures are, he said these creatures don't belong in basically a bathtub, being forced to do tricks for food. And he felt like it was his fault. He had started the entire captive dolphin industry. And so he was now his mission in life to reverse what he felt he had started, because he was the first one. He was a Navy scuba diver, and he used to train like dolphins for the Navy and everything. Like, that's how he got into dolphins, and then that's how he learned how to work with them and train them. And then he started training them for the aquariums, and he regretted that. Amazing story, right? Love the guy. He was a freaking cool guy. So I met him he was doing a conference in Berkeley, met him there, went and met Paul Watson, with Sea Shepherd, who was doing the red carpet event, kind of did that at the same time, met them both. So I went to Taiji actually kind of with both groups. It was originally starting off with Save Japan Dolphins, but then I got there and met the very first Cove Guardians, the first, so now we're like the old school ones. They were like the original Cove Guardians, because it went on for years, but we were the first group right after the movie The Cove came out. We were there before Japan even had their act together, knew what to do with us. A bunch of crazy Westerners showing up, fighting for the dolphins, like, whoa. And then women too, all the Sea Shepherd women, they didn't know, because in Japan, it's a kind of a male-dominated country, like, I don't want to say it like that. I mean, they're like, women have full rights and everything, but it's just like Western women are more outspoken than Japanese women. We'll just, in general, we'll leave it at that. And so we have these crazy, like, we had girls from like South Africa screaming, and I was like, oh, these people are awesome, fearless warriors, like, ready to. My girlfriend, who, I have 2 sons with, she went with me, and they were doing right in the middle of a dolphin slaughter. And I remember we had our kids with us, and because we brought the babies, right? I was like, I'm bringing the kids. And they're like, yeah, it'll be great for PR. So we showed up there at the Cove with me and my girlfriend and my 1 and 2-year-old babies, right? And I remember, like, they were literally stabbing a bunch of dolphins to death right on the beach. There was blood everywhere. It was crazy. You could smell the blood. Like, it was like, what? This is horrible. It was unreal. Like, wow, Flipper. They were killing Flipper right in front of our eyes. We couldn't take it. And so my girlfriend, she's like, she's Native American, right? So she has also like kind of a strong connection to animals and nature. She's like, I can't take it. I want to go jump in. And she was holding our 1-year-old, and then she's like, will you hold the baby? I'm like, yeah, I got you. So she handed me the baby. She goes in, and this was in the newspaper and everything. And it was crazy too, because they had news crews there from like Tokyo and Osaka, like documenting the standoff and all this. And so, yeah, my girlfriend, she's crazy like me. She dives into the ocean, swam out to where they're killing the dolphins. They're like, oh, they're freaking out. They're calling. There's so much was going on at once, Then, like, the guy, they had a Yakuza boss who basically came down there. He wasn't really, I ended up talking with him later.
Yakuza.
Yeah, this was a boss of the Yakuza, and he was running for governor of the province. And so he had this giant van with a bunch of speakers on it that he drove back and forth saying, fuck you, Ickleberry. Fuck you, Sea Shepherd. Fuck you. It's just, I'm like, what's up with this guy? And so him and his crew of the Yakuza guys, they all were dressed like 1920s gangsters, right? With the brim hats and the suits. I was like, what are these guys? Because I'm from the hood, right? I'm a gangster, right? I'm like, what are these guys? Like, these guys like came from a movie, and they're like, and the police are like, no, Yakuza, don't mess with those guys. And I actually had seen the guy, this was like all going on at the same time. It was crazy. The guy was yelling at some of my friends, right? And then he was yelling at my girlfriend because she had the Save Japan Dolphins shirt on. So then my son, who was 2 at the time, he ran up and he's like, bad guy, don't hurt the dolphins, yell at my mama, and threw a rock, hit the Yakuza bus in the knee with the rock. And he's like, whoa. And he said, oh, baby dolphin, very angry, just like your papa dolphin. Sorry if that sounds horrible. That's how he said it. It's what he said. And he's like, oh, but then he was really impressed, right? So he started actually talking to us. And then then about that time was, they were killing the dolphins. And then my girlfriend said, I want to go in. I'm like, okay. So she hands me the little baby. She dives in. The police go in. They drag her out with the police boat. They're about to arrest her. They got her in cuffs. She's soaking wet. all the news crews are like, wow, this is a great story. We're really getting the story today, right? And so I'm like, well, if you take her, you got to take my son because he's 15 months old and he only breastfeeds, or he bottle, he breastfeeds. He didn't bottle feed, right? So you got to take. What am I doing with my kid? He's breastfeeds, and they're like, oh no. And so then they realize this is looking horrible for them. They're killing dolphins. The news is there. Now they're arresting women who have nursing babies, and they're like, oh. So they're like, okay, never mind. We're just going to give you a warning this time. We're not going to take you to jail, but we think you're very rude. And my girl was like, screw you. I think you're rude. We're in a public beach and you're killing dolphins. Take care of the sun don't shine. So anyways, and then the Yakuza boss is like, wow, you guys are actually, I think you guys are cool. I'm like, can I talk to you? So I ended up going and talking to this guy for like 2 hours. And he's like, yeah, actually, you don't even care about dolphins one way or the other. I don't need it. I'm just here because I'm a nationalist and I don't want people from other countries coming to Japan and telling us what to do, and I'm running for governor too. So he's like, that was his whole stick. And so anyways, but that is insane. Yeah, all this is going on. Yeah. So I was in the newspaper, and they had us in the Japanese newspapers, and then the Sea Shepherd magazine was like, was like their friend, and Paul Watson put out a statement.
When was that?
2010, because the Cove came out 2009, and this is right over the Cove. So yeah, 2010.
So we're with the time that we have left, just share with me whatever you want about the Ukraine.
Ukraine is a beautiful country, and it's absolutely heartbreaking what's going on there. My mom speaks Russian. She went to a Russian house. She's taught me Russian. And I grew up thinking Russia was really cool. And I knew all the Cold War stuff, and I knew they were like our enemy. But, it was Cold War for a long time. So they weren't actually doing too much. They did terrible stuff, before my time, like with invading, Poland and Czechoslovakia and all that stuff. But that was like kind of a long time ago. This is, now growing up, I didn't hate Russia. I actually thought Russia was a cool country, man. And then honestly, they pissed me off on the Olympics. So they keep cheating. I love the Olympics, man. Like that's my thing, right? I love the Olympics. Actually, I just went to the opening ceremonies in Paris a couple months ago, right? I just love it. I love the Olympics. I love the spirit. I love World Cup too. Just the whole globe coming together and fair competition and ideals and respecting beautiful athletes who just, the patriotism and I just love it. The Olympics is my thing. And Russia kept cheating at the Olympics, in Sochi, they were doping and then cheating and then lying. And it was just getting on my nerves. And the final straw was Kamila Valieva, their ice skater. I loved her. She was the most amazing ice skater I'd ever seen. And then it turns out, she's doping. And I was like, oh, my dad chopped up his heart medication on my cutting board by accident. That's why I have this banned substance that makes my heart able to hold more oxygen. It's just nonsense. I was pissed off about that. I was like, freaking Russia, man. And then they poisoned, they killed Boris Nemtsov. He was running against Putin. They just executed him right in front of the Kremlin. And then Navalny, they poisoned his underwear. And I was like, they poisoned his underwear. Like, that's messed up, man. And then sent him to, the gulag. And then he was brave and he came back and they arrested him again. And now he's dead. They killed him. And so, I was just getting like, what's up with this shit, And then I had been to Kyiv one time many years ago, just on a layover, but it was just beautiful. And everyone I met was nice and friendly. And so when I saw him massing his troops on the border, we knew once they brought in the blood banks, this is for real. They're bringing blood banks up. They're going to invade. And we warned them. And Ukraine was just, they didn't want to believe it. They're like, no, they would never do that to us, blah, blah, blah. And so, when they actually invaded and then everyone saw it, when it was hot on the news, right? The horror just blowing everything up. And then just seeing the Ukrainians stand up for themselves and fight back, and then Zelensky, it was inspirational. I need ammo, not a ride. That's just the most iconic. Someday they're going to have like a statue of him with that phrase on it. They offered to get him out of there. And he's like, no, I'm staying here. With my people and my country. And I've always been a patriotic American. I love America, and I'll say just real quick about America. They say, if your country's never broken your heart, you don't love your country enough, right? And my country's broken my heart a few times, right? But, I love it and I'm super patriotic and it just means everything to me. And to see that these Ukrainians feel the same way and they're willing to fight and die for their right to be a free people. And then you start learning the history of like the Holodomor where they were starved and then the actual oppression of the Soviet Union and finding out that some of the most brilliant scientists were actually, a lot of them Ukrainian, and that's why Russia wants Ukraine because they're kind of the cradle, the birthplace of Slavic culture, but they're very, very Ukrainian. Have that identity. They absolutely are not Russian. A lot of them speak Russian because that's kind of what Russia's done. There's intermixing. The Ukrainian Russian languages are a little bit similar, right? And sitting home and when they actually invaded and seeing the bombs and blowing up and then just getting mad and then you stood there just killing people and bombing schools and then like Bucha, the rapes, the torture, just the horrible war crimes, and then just Putin smugly lying about it and calling them Nazis when Zelensky's Jewish. It's just the biggest nonsense. And like I said, I was already pissed off at this guy for all the big stuff and the cheating and then seeing that the Ukrainians actually, they were going to fall in 3 days. The Kyiv was going to be overrun, and they didn't. They were fighting back tooth and nail, and it was so inspiring. I was like, wow, and then when they pushed Russia back, and then they had all these villages, and I saw, a news, it was I don't know what you call it, news, because it was a story on the news, and it was about how even these liberated villages that the Russians got kicked out of, the Ukrainians can't go back to them because they're covered in unexploded ordnance. They said, yeah. And I was like, dude, that's like what I do, right? That was my thing in the Marines. I was a combat engineer. I can help. Sorry, I'll make it quick. When I got back, when you get back, from deployment, you have to turn in all your gear, right? But when I got back from war, I went almost straight to prison. So I never got a chance to turn in all my gear. So I still had it. So I was like, I still got my flying jacket and my helmet. And of course I didn't even think technically Kevlar goes bad after 7 years or some shit right now. It's I was just like, but I can help. I got my gas mask and I got my canteen and I got some blankets and warm socks. I'm just going over there with everything I have. I'll buy anything I can, just do whatever I can to help out. So yeah, I was like, I can't sit here and watch on the news with all these people being just killed and just the horrors and the war crimes, and then seeing the bravery of them fighting back. And I was like, I kind of went over there initially just saying, yeah, I just want to donate all my stuff and do whatever I can. I said, I'll, clear mines. I'll make soup if I have to. That was kind of my, and I didn't tell my mom I was going. I told her I was going to go to Poland and work in a soup kitchen in Poland. And I knew damn well I was going to Ukraine. And she knew too. She's not on social media, but other people knew and they told her. And so I remember when I got back, I was like, yeah, Mom, sorry I didn't tell you I was going to Ukraine. I knew you'd just be too worried. She's like, I knew you weren't going all the way to Poland and not, she's like, I knew you weren't going all the way to damn Poland just to stay there and not go to Ukraine. I know you better than that. And I was like, okay. So anyways, yeah, I just went over there just really willing to do whatever I could. I've been over there 4 times. I've worked with Territorial Defense Forces. I worked with the International Legion. I've done everything from, demining, removing unexploded ordnance, to being a courier, I worked with a PTSD veterans hospital. I went and volunteered at. I went to Bucha, the city that's really famous for the massacre there, and helped rebuild houses. I just met tons of friends. And when I went to Ukraine, what really struck me was how they are more similar to Americans than almost any other country I've ever been to. And that shocked me because my notion going over there is this is the Soviet Union. It's going to be drab, gray buildings. It all looks the same and all the people aren't going to be smiling and they're going to be stone cold. And apparently, from what I've heard, Russia is actually like that. I haven't been to Russia and I'll never be able to go now, ever. And so maybe in 30 years or something, I can maybe normalize relations and I can go in and see St. Petersburg or something for a day. I doubt it. Anyways, so I remember showing up in Ukraine and then the people were so grateful. Like, what are you doing here? Where are you from? Oh my God, thank you. Just hugs, just gratitude, just tears, just so many people hugging me and just crying. And any line I'm in, somebody grabbing me out of the line and putting me to the front of the line or offering me free food or just, whatever they could. And then just the culture there is incredible. The people, they just laugh and they joke and there's graffiti everywhere. And there's, everyone's got pets, a pet dog and they're walking around and their parks are immaculate, clean. Everyone works together. They call it Toloka, where the people come together and keep the streets clean and clean the parks. And they have all these community events and stuff. And it was just beautiful. And every park has statues and fountains and flowers and there's coffee shops everywhere. And I was like, what? They're a massive coffee culture. They have like a generator in a park with some guy whipping out coffee. I'm like, you guys are awesome. And the food was incredible. And all of this took me by surprise. I just didn't know shit, and then just meeting the people and just so nice and so brave, but funny too. And I remember thinking, I was like, you guys are like more Western. I remember I met a colonel at the PTSD hospital. He's actually in charge. He's, and he took me through their hospital, and they have all these amazing veterans programs, from acupuncture to aromatherapy to massage therapy, and like dipping in hot pools and cool pools. And they have fishing. They took like an old resort and turned it into like a veterans hospital for guys with PTSD. And it was amazing. It's the most incredible thing I've had. It was so much more advanced than anything I've ever seen at the VA in America. Sorry, I love America, and I don't even bash on the VA like most people do. The VA's been fine for me. They've taken good care of me every time I've gone there, right? But I was like, dude, we don't got no shit like this. Like that. This is incredible. And I remember talking, I was heartbroken. And these guys saying, they're like, wow, you came all the way from America. You have a family, you have a job, like, and you came here to risk dying to help us. Like, thank you. We love America. Thank you so much. They're so grateful. They're so wonderful. They're just some beautiful people. The young people, they know history. They're so well informed compared to a lot of youths in America that don't know jack, and it's really frustrating. They have the right to vote, they don't vote. They get free school and they drop out. They don't, they just don't care about about anything. They're so myopic. And so I kind of was thinking, like, that's just how young people are. And I guess I can't judge because I was a dumbass when I was young too, right? But but you go to Ukraine and they're like, well, yes, according to because of the Budapest Memorandum and blah blah blah. And they're sharp. They're really, really smart, and they're on it because they have to be. They're not sitting in cozy America 2 oceans away from the rest of the world, just trying to, they can't be isolationists. They're in the thick of it, right? And just, meeting these young people and how smart they were. And I remember talking to that colonel that day, and after I was just like so choked up going through this whole thing and meeting all these veterans and exchanging patches. That's the thing now. I remember the first time I went to Ukraine, I had my old uniform. We didn't even have patches and Velcro back then, right? Your shit was sewn on, or you take your shit to the, they iron it on, or so, and now it's just like a Velcro patch. So I remember the first time I went there, and all these Ukrainian guys were like ripping off their patch and giving it to me, and I didn't have shit to give them. I was like, oh crap. So the second time I went, remember when I came home, I ordered like a shit ton of USMC patches and random cool patches to go and trade. Now I have an awesome patch collection. So I leave them all, and they love it. They're like, oh, Marines, good Marines. They love it. It's like the coolest patch you can give someone. US Marine, wow. Like, they love it, right? You get pretty, and they have cool patches, like, like awesome patches are like, oh, like just skeletons with middle fingers, like crazy, or like a guy bending over like a Russian, like, just crazy shit, right? And patches that, they don't even want to give up, but they're like, oh, Marine, okay, but they'll trade it for the Marine Corps patch. So yeah, it's awesome. Anyways, so I remember telling Colonel Ihor, and I said, you know what, man? I said, you Ukrainians are more, I said, I've been all over Europe, I've been all over the West, right? I've been in England, France, Spain, Norway, I've been everywhere, you guys are more Western than any other Western country I know of. You guys are more close to Americans in your spirit, your ideals, your bravery, just all that, your culture, and just meeting different Ukrainians of different backgrounds, different ethnicities, and just, I said, you guys are awesome. They're tolerant of gay people. They're tolerant. They have black people there. They're, and Ukraine I remember they had some knocks in the beginning, like it was some rural people who kicked some black guys off a train, but that's not my experience there. That, these are kind of rural people that don't speak English, that maybe have, like, a lot of rural people are not exposed to different races. So they just kind of have that ingrained racism because they don't know any different. They only know what they've been told. And I think that's true in every country in the world, right? You've got these people out there like that. And so that they got some bad press for that, but that wasn't my experience at all over there. They're very fair. They're very open to all races, all religions. Right now, they've got a Jewish president. Their Secretary of Defense is a Muslim guy. Most of them are Christian. You know what I mean? I love the country, man. And I remember telling, the colonel that, and he literally teared up and hugged me. He was like that. He said, you don't know how much that means to me. Me just telling him that you guys are like us, man. Like, you guys might as well be Americans, like, and they're just wonderful people. And so, yeah, I've been going back again and again and volunteering with different organizations to do whatever I can to help them out. Very happy that a lot of the world supports us, and very disappointed that a lot of the big democracies are not supporting, because the whole world should be against this. It's blatant, it's just absolute blatant, and the lies and the propaganda are so thick and so frustrating. And I just feel like, I have to stand up against the tyranny.
Well, hey, man, you're home safe now.
Yeah.
It is
for a minute.
Dude, it has been an absolute privilege to sit here and listen to you because I talk very little.
Yeah, and I talk a lot really fast. Sorry about that.
But
You're going to have to slow down the recording. Maybe.
No, I don't think I'm going to slow it down. I'm pretty sure everybody's going to take it in. This was awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. And before I close, I got to give a shout out to Heather at Ravenous Raven Design, Build and Recite, for JMac at Studio 42. And Dee, thank you for being here, man. This has been great.
Thank you. My pleasure, my privilege.